Oh, hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
I'm Mikey, the E stands for evil.
And we're here to discuss those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it. And tonight we have Ellie Lambert. So, first off, yes, Gamer in Yellow is no longer with us. No, I'm just kidding. He's just not here this week. But he told us to press on, and so we will. But yeah, so we are covering Ellie Lambert, which is another Curtisville story. It is Curtisville adjacent. Since the story is titled Ellie Lambert, who is a character of note from the various Curtisville stories, specifically Summer Break and Summer Break 2017, and even our previous story that we just read, The Way Through the Woods. So the story, Ellie Lambert, is on Creepypasta.wiki, along with all the other stories by Pratt99. So you can check it out over there. But yeah, I guess we should give our initial recommendations before we dive into this. I'm going to recommend this one.
I'm going to not recommend this one.
Interesting. Well, let's see why we gave both or quite contrasting recommendations. Starting with the rundown. So, Kess, a Safrasian, some kind of Fey people, perhaps, who has recently become a new citizen to the town of Swanwick, is attending a welcoming party / midsummer ceremony in her honor at town hall and hanging out with her friend Vanessa, the mayor's eldest daughter. The two are looking on at an awkward girl named Ellie Lambert, who is also new to town, hailing from America, and staying with her aunt. Ellie is very awkward and strange. There are various unpleasant rumors about her and her circumstances, and for the most part, she's sticking to the corner of the room and not interacting with anyone. And as the girls continue to spy upon her, the mayor herself pops up behind them, catching them unawares. After a brief chat, the mayor looks over where Ellie was, but Kess notices she's not there anymore, and it's as though the mayor has seen a ghost before going off and getting ready for the final parts of the ceremony or the party. The party goes on with the full welcome speech from the mayor, and Kess and Vanessa eventually head outside shortly after to make a makeshift stage where a bunch of younger werewolves, imps, and fae are putting together a play of John Carpenter's The Thing, complete with flamethrower. Things get out of hand, and Vanessa and her friends accidentally set a pavilion and some other places on fire, getting them all in trouble. Later that night, Kess, who's now back at home in her little cottage with all her gifts from the party, including various new caged pets that were gifted to her, reminisces about the events of the evening and her past, especially in regards to the strange girl. Apparently, one of the last times Kess saw Ellie Lambert that evening, the awkward girl seemed to change her form into a new person under the moonlight as she was walking around. And thinking on this, it dredges up some memories for Kess. It's here that Kess tells the story of her past and some stranger goings-on that had followed her to her new pets, who seem eager to listen to her. Before coming to Swanwick, Kess had come to a city in a place called Merlia called the Merlia United Kingdom, called West Des Moines New, after Kess and her people fled the destruction of their homeland of Safrasia. It's here that she caught news of various odd things, like a person being a fey, like an immortal fey creature being turned into a mortal as punishment for some killings they were doing. And eventually she becomes a server at a local tavern. While working there, she saw all kinds come in and out of the tavern. Though the strangest and creepiest was at night, and only a few times a year, when this ghostly invisible thing would wander the streets nearby, singing a strange wonky song. Folks called it short hoggers. One of Kess's associates tried to be an occult investigator about the situation, and got herself killed in the process. And things started to escalate from there. Kess left West Des Moines New to get away from the killings, and it seemed that this short hoggers, would follow her and kill others around her. Eventually, she emigrated to Swanwick, and we are now caught up to the present, but something is yet afoot. Something malicious and cold begins stalking over to Kess's cottage and taps and knocks on the door just as she is dozing off to sleep. In fact, she thinks that it's some local kids just trying to stir up trouble. But she goes to check the door and finds it's very cold inside the house. In fact, it's ice cold, almost like Fimbulwinter, as she remarks. And there's some arcane locking mechanism that has jammed blades and various shipping rope against the doors to keep whatever's outside from getting in. That's when something sinister tries to imitate Vanessa's voice, beckoning Kess to come outside. And when that fails, it then attempts to bash its way through the door. Kess quickly grabs an advanced rifle that she had smuggled into this country. This weapon was crafted by her people long ago and has since been banned for its power and lethality. She blasts through the door and slays the thing, which begins cycling through different identities. Begins shifting through different identities, both human and inhuman, including Ellie Lambert, before finally melting into a puddle of black sticky sludge. Kess frowns at this, her stalker finally dead, it seems, before starting work on repairing the door that she blew through, or that she blew a hole through. Finn. So yeah, that was the story of Ellie Lambert. And I suppose next we shall move on to Everyone Tolerates the Grammar Inquisitions. At this point, I've got a number. There's a good number of Inquisition quotes and such.
Okay.
I'm gonna start with this one here. Even her own cousin can't stand to be around her. The eldest one, Sandra, had already moved out and is now staying with friends up in Branchell. So I feel like this should be this is dialogue, but I feel like it should be even her own cousins can't stand to be around her. The eldest one, Sandra, blah, blah, blah. Just because it mentions the eldest one, so then therefore it wouldn't be her own singular cousin. It should be multiple cousins.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Then, do you have anything about the double dash? Because
well, the double dash is actually I have heard that, I have seen that before, and it's basically a use for an ellipses. Or it's sort of it's that kind of thing that's used in writing.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have something more on it, or were you just you didn't like it?
I just didn't like it.
Fair.
I mean, you use ellipses already.
Yeah,
but why use the double dash?
Well, I actually did encounter that because a couple of years back when somebody was actually helping correct my own writing and stuff, and suggested rather than using ellipses, use a long dash, or a double dash. So, yeah,
interesting.
The next thing I have here, welcome to my tense talk. For a moment, just as the girl stepped into one of the moonlit patches, the whole shape of her face seems to have changed. So yeah, I think seems should actually be seemed to have changed, since everything else was kind of in past tense. Again, welcome to my tense talk. The next one I have here. She could be anywhere, she could be anywhere, Kess thought numbly. If she could change her face like that, then she could look just about anyone. I think you need to have, she could look like just about anyone.
Yeah.
And my next one here, what I say wasn't a slovenly dressed girl with an empty, flat face of a large baby. I think it should say what I saw wasn't a slovenly dressed girl with an empty blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next one here. Also, I'd say that would be dialogue, but I think this was like when she was when Kess was telling her story to her animal companions, her caged animal companions. So, and the way the story, like part of the story is done, is it's done in that sort of style where like the character is like telling a story like vocally through in the story. So it has like a quotation at the front of the paragraph, and then when it stops the paragraph, it goes to the next one. It doesn't have an end quote because it's going to continue going like with the same like speech or the same dialogue. So it's technically dialogue, but I mean it's also like an actual story, so like they should have better grammar. But I'll move on to the next thing I have. Meanwhile, my roommate was having hysterics on the couch, and I thinking to myself, "Oh great, someone just caught with a bag of Sparkle Frieza or Brain Boasters." So I think first off, and I'm thinking to myself, and then also someone just got caught with a bag of Sparkle Frieza, blah blah blah. Then the next thing I have, no, the weather forecast had said it would be a calm night with a bit of fog, and there weren't any trees close enough to and there weren't any trees close enough to tuff the cottage. So I think it's supposed to be touch the cottage. For this is when like the tapping's happening on the cottage, and Kess wakes up to it.
Yes.
And then on a more positive note, while stilly like of a somnambulant, Kess went into her bedroom and carefully fetched down her surprise. So somnambulant, adjective, resembling or characteristic of a sleepwalker, sluggish. I learned a new word today. I was like, what the hell is a somnambulant? Though I'm pretty sure she made up stilly in that sentence.
Well, stilly word, quietly and with little movement.
That's a word?
Yep.
I learned 2 words today. My God. Walking stilly, like of a somnambulant. Wow. Just doubling down on that description. All right. Well, that is the end of my grammar inquisition. So, Mikey, your inquisition. Here's the torch.
Hey, you got the one that I had, so it's on to Conjunction Junction.
All right. And next stop, Conjunction Junction. Doot, doot.
It's not just me who notices this. Other people at school, my sisters and dad. It's because her aunt happened to be a very prominent business person, was Vanessa's immediate answer. And she doesn't trust Ellie to be left alone in the same room with a purse or alone in a coach, and certainly never in the house. But why send her here? Tess exclaimed in disbelief. So, when it does happen, it's actually cause for celebration. But Mayor Desrosiers, or is it Desrosiers?
I kind of went with Desrosiers, honestly.
Desrosiers.
Yeah.
Okay. But Mayor Desrosiers didn't notice. It's just that I thought I saw someone. Or, as Yoda would say, the weeboo vibe is strong in this one. And when Vanessa asked if she wanted to come to a gothic theater production of a famous horror movie, Kess immediately accepted. It turned out the show was taking place in Vanessa's backyard. And it was a reinterpretation of John Carpenter's The Thing. It was like when the thing took over a body. It left just enough of the host consciousness so that the imitation still felt like the original. It all started back a few years ago. So unfriendly, superficial, and self-absorbed. And I'm like, what exactly, what do you mean by a dog's life? It was the fat one who spoke up next. But that Van Devereux girl looks feeble-minded. But I swear I just saw it was starting to be a pretty good place to live, although I still didn't like Des Moines New. But on miserable wet nights, when the streets were generally deserted, something would wander near the apartment complex and sing in this phlegmy burble. It seemed a mild-mannered spook, and most of the residents along that particular street were used to it, treating it as a trifling nightly inconvenience, even going so far as accepting it as a rather eccentric member of the neighborhood. But as the weeks went by, I eventually got used to it. So when everyone was out at a movie one Halloween night, she called that something in, something that she thought was a lost child. But a person just can't keep quiet about that sort of thing. But that wasn't why I left Marilia, Kess went on slowly. It would always leave in the morning, and all the wicker wood or coaches would all be soaked in black, oily slime, unfit for anything but the bonfire. But I felt it was all worth it after my harrowing experience in West Des Moines New. But it wasn't about an illegal substance. It was about my roommate seeing the short hoggers. And when she finally told us the story, a shiver of cold horror ran through me. It was squirming and twisting around in a chair, she stammered. But I ran back inside and locked the door. Its face. It was like the Wiccan girl that got killed a year back in West Des Moines New. And yet it wasn't. And I knew there was something hiding behind it, something even more terrible. So that everyone in my story, and I know nothing more than what I just experienced, and I don't want to know any more. It was close to midnight when Kess awoke. It had to have been an animal then, maybe even a bat or an owl brushing up against the glass. It's like Fibblewinter in here. It's me. It's cold. It's late. It's 12 a.m. But while the blades put on the display were just inert metal, the ones dug deep around the door were of a completely different nature. It was a Safrazian-made rifle, a room temperature superconducting Langston with a telescopic scope and a carbon fiber barrel, to be exact. But no sooner did that unpleasant thought enter her mind than she quickly shut it out. Finn.
Wow. So from what I got of that, from what I gathered from your conjunction there, narratively, it seemed like right off the hop, like again, like they were talking about this weird girl, and then she was invited to a goth party, and then she changed something and started attacking, and then like basically started chasing this person all like across places until eventually she got put down. Until she got confronted with it, and then she used her the gun on it, but we don't really get the ending of whether or not she dealt with it or not. Just that she had that gun as things were happening. Yeah. Basically a little bit leaner cut version of like a rundown. Yeah. But I suppose that's what happens when you start sentences with words that they probably shouldn't, like its, ends, or buts, because there's always better words to use, I guess. I don't know. I don't usually do this, so. Though not bad for for saying that off the cuff without that being written down.
Yep.
But yeah, so I guess we'll move on since we are down a grammar in yellow to actual thoughts. So I'm going to start with this one here. Her name's Ellie Lambert, and she's from California, the state of Jefferson, to be exact. Oh, wait, the state of Jefferson? My American geography is a bit rusty, but I'm pretty sure that Jefferson isn't among the 50 United States of America. And she's from there and also from California. So this brought me down a little bit of a rabbit hole Googling Jefferson State.
Yep.
So according to Wikipedia, which there's a whole article about it, I'll just like give this a little bit of it. The state of Jefferson was a publicity stunt organized in 1935 by disaffected residents of southern Oregon and Northern California, who were concerned that Salem and Sacramento were ignoring their region's needs. So yeah, and then there's a whole Wikipedia article that goes into it. There's a lot more history to it than that, but that's basically the gist of it. It was like a publicity stunt to try and raise awareness for like support for the area that they were suggesting the state of Jefferson happen. I just thought that was interesting. It's like, huh. But in this world that of these stories, is there actually a state of Jefferson between Oregon and California now? Because that's going to be a running theme through my story, my notes here. The setting, locations. So just be prepared for that.
I had to look up the state of Jefferson to go, okay, so this is an alternate reality type scenario.
I'm guessing that, yeah, like, well, we kind of already knew that this was kind of an alternate reality because like there are magical beings living among humanity. So yeah, it was sort of, but yeah, like it's definitely seems like there's definitely, we're seeing more of the world alterations in these stories as we go. But I'll move on to the next thing I have here. Unlike Kess, who rather was baffled and somewhat flattered by the party thrown in her honor, Vanessa thought that the occasion was a total waste of her teenage time, and she had way better things to do. In Vanessa's case, attending a Motley Crue concert with all her friends. Oh, so Vanessa, like from the Summer Camp 2017 story, like the wraparound bit. And as it turns out, we finally get some clarification about her connection with the mayor at the end of that wrap-up story. Or that wrap-up plot where she is the mayor's eldest daughter, even. So this may give us a bit more context to the previous story we had with Vanessa, at least part of it. And we do kind of get like a little bit more, like this seems to be like, I think this is a prequel, if I remember correctly, from Pratt's comment on YouTube that when she sent this guys, I believe she sent some of these stories to us as a link. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, good, we're finally getting some more character like development and some context to like some characters that we've heard of in previous stories. Would have been nice if we had a little bit of that context in the other story, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing I have here is another geography issue, or another geography question. But why send her here? Kess exclaimed in disbelief. Can't she get therapy back in the States? The Republic of the Americas pretty much sucks at the whole mental health thing, Vanessa replied pointedly. Oh, so this isn't in the States. First off, like Swanwick is not in the States. It's actually in like, I'm guessing it's in the UK. Just based on the poshness of the upper crust that we see in some of these characters, and the town's names being like Brunchell and Swanwick and stuff like that. It still seems to be in the Curtisville universe because we have Ellie Lambert here. It's just on the other side of the pond, as it were. Also, the Republic of America, and I apparently, like, looking up that term, it is actually a term used for the US.
Yep.
So that was I've rarely heard it. So like heard it said that way. So it comes off as alternative like reality when you do stuff like that. But that's
but it is reality because the U.S. is a republic. So
yeah. I looked at like the Republic of the Americas, and it's like, oh no, turns out that is actually a thing. Okay, it's just an uncommon use of the like an uncommon term for the USA.
Yeah.
But and then also it like at this point in the story, like we're getting like again conversations with the characters, and they're talking about like things like the Tour de Fairy and like other things like that. And I was like, oh, good. It's nice to know that we're getting some more of that magical realism that I love in these stories. And it comes a lot, and it just comes into full force later on in the story specifically. And then the next thing I have here, that night, Kess stood at the window of her new house, or Heron Manor, as it was known, peering into the shadowy Swanwick forest. So I'm noticing a theme of this town. Swanwick, Heron Manor. Is there a Stork Creek? A duck pond? Or a duck bridge? Also, just putting something together from, again, the previous story that we covered last week, The Way Through the Woods. I'm just tossing this out here, but I wonder if this town is the place Judith saw Lucille pass over into from like that portal that she made in the alleyway in The Way Through the Woods, like background story we got, where the character describes seeing a city through the portal that reminded Judith of the Scottish capital of Edinburgh with its steep streets and tall, gloomy buildings. Just because like that's kind of like, I mean, not to say that every town in the UK or in that part of the neck of the woods is like cobbled streets and gloomy buildings, but I mean they're pretty close. they've got that vibe about them. They got that architecture and like that old world architecture and such to it. So, yeah, it just had me wondering if like this was the place that she was going to, especially since there is a connection we know between Ellie and Lucille. So like, was this where she was going? Or like somewhere near this place, or like maybe to West Des Moines New, perhaps. But I'll move on to the next thing I have here. You would think more people would be moving here on account of the gift giving and hospitality, she wondered. Maybe I got this VIP treatment because my arrival happened to coincide with the annual Midsummer Eve tradition. So I'm still left wondering at this point if the whole world is influenced by fantastical denizens walking among us, or if it's just these little towns that are like dotting the world and that are just like safe ports for like creatures from other realities and other places that just kind of like live among the population or of the human population, or like live among us kind of thing. Like, is this a Shadowrun situation, or is this like a Storybrooke or Fable situation where like it's magical creatures living among us in secret in small towns or small colonies and stuff like that. Kind kind of like in the sense of like, yeah, like I said, like Storybrooke from like Once Upon a Time, or the Community and Fable, or even for you, Mikey, like for like Eureka, like except instead of like high tech people, it's fairies and magical creatures. Or is this a full Shadowrun situation where like it's an alternate reality of our world where like this is just commonplace?
It's an alternate reality.
Yeah, I'm getting that more and more, especially what happens later from a description that we get later in the story, which I will bring up. Actually,
Okay.
I can bring it up now, I guess.
Yeah.
With the quote here. Hang on, where is my notes there? Yeah. So this might kind of like toss me. I'm not sure if this is what you're referencing, but this is what I was thinking. Tattered clouds scudded past the closest moon, and gray banks of fog rolled in from the Chudderheim Channel. I'm sorry, the closest moon? Is Swanwick on Earth? Or is this another reality? I have so many
It,
questions.
well, the quote that I have is in regard to the smuggling of the gun.
Oh, yes.
Had this happened in human-dominated Midgard instead, she
Yes.
would have not only been detected by the numerous security devices, but promptly whisked away and placed in a holding cell somewhere.
Yep.
So that confirms it does not happen on Earth.
Except for this though too, like, because then we get things like this. This is another quote I have. I ended up moving to a house in East Dulwich, with 5 others in it. And this is when she left West Des Moines New, which we know is in the Merlian United Kingdom. I was to share a room with a chatty Aussie exchange student, and the privilege would cost me about £550 per month. But I felt it was all worth it after my harrowing experience in West Des Moines New. So yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like we're in the mundane world or Midgard, because I guess that's the term for the mortal world by these
Yep.
creatures and beings. But it does seem like, at least like for me, I'm still trying to figure out like where Swanwick is. Like, is it in Merlia somewhere, or like is it like on like some threshold between like our like the mortal world um and uh and these magical worlds? Because like it definitely feels like this area, these locations are heavily inspired by the British Isles, so like London and stuff like that. Like Des Moines, like West Des Moines New,
Well,
the way it was described kind of felt like London to me.
yeah. So the way I see it is that it's more Midgard adjacent.
Yeah, like
So like
parallel
an
universe.
yeah, an alternate reality where the land masses are the same, but things are slightly different, and you can transfer to our reality at some point if you want.
Yeah,
But it's basically the fairy world separate from the human world.
yeah, and I mean, it seems like a lot of this stuff is like Pratt may be pulling from a lot of like fairy folklore, which does give credence to this, because I know from like digging into like Vossen and other like fairy lore and folklore, there are like countless like different fairy worlds and like fairy lands and realms that are accessible to from our real world, like um through like gateways and openings that sometimes you can just slip into by accident. Like they make it really, it's actually fairly easy, so it's kind of bleeds into our world sometimes.
Mhm.
But it is an alternate reality that's just kind of parallel to our own. It's just like slightly to the side.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I really do enjoy the story, like because again we get things like she goes to East Dulwich. Well, Dulwich or Dulwich, because it's English, is an actual place in London. So it's clear that like they're pulling names from like real world UK while making this like kind of fantastical version of it. Because we also like she's like reading newspapers, like she's reading a newspaper at one point with about like some creature, some individual that gets like sentenced to become immortal and live out the rest of their days as a mortal for like a few decades. And
mhm,
meanwhile, she's talking to some goblins. Like this is kind
yeah.
of going into that like that goblin market that we read in Summer Break. Um, and so yeah, it makes me want like I'm I'm starting over the course of the story. I started getting a kind of a feel for like the setting, but I was like I've had to meander through it to figure out like where exactly things were, like where are we in situationally. And I don't hate it, but it's just like it was a little confusing at times because trying to figure out like, all right, is Swanwick in the real world and it's like Curtisville where there's just like there's people, there's creatures among us, or is this in some alternate reality that's just adjacent to ours and like they can go to the real world, but like it's not the real world, or it's not the mortal world. It's its own little dimension. So yeah, that was sort of my point there for like as I was navigating through the story, I was trying to figure out where we were and what was going on. Like I got a strong sense of what was going on through the story, but I was trying to figure out where is it going on in is what I kept asking, like question wise.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I have, you brought this up in your conjunction introduction, but I'm going to use the full quote.
Okay.
Vanessa wouldn't go into specific details about the incident that caused her to totally reject Ellie's friendship, except to say that it nearly ruined her middle school reputation and further cemented her hatred for the anime genre and its numerous fandoms. A hardcore otaku, then, Kess thought with a grimace. Or as Yoda would say, the weeaboo vibe is strong with this one. Or strong in this one. I love how they're scoffing at this girl for being like a nerdy fan of anime. When they themselves seem to be quoting nerdy stuff like Star Wars and Spielberg films, like with references and quotes and stuff. Like, y'all are a bunch of fucking nerds.
Yeah.
Now, on that point, I'm pretty sure it's actually Darth Vader who says the Force is strong with this one, not Yoda. But like I had to look that up because like I was like, because I see like online a lot of people attribute that line with Yoda. But like even to the point of like it's like on like t-shirts with Yoda's face saying it, or like on like people, it's like decorations for people's walls that have like a photo, like an image of Yoda, and then that like on next to it. I was like, but that's a Darth Vader line.
Yeah.
Also, if we know if Yoda was the one to say it, it would be like strong in the Force, or strong strong with the Force, or
this one is, yeah.
It is,
Like...
yeah. Strong with the Force, this one is, yeah. Because of his whole like kind of reverse speech.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's my own nerdiness coming through, but like we all knew that already.
Yeah, but I mean, when it comes to Star Wars, there's a lot of things that are misquoted, like the whole Luke, I am your father. He never actually says Luke.
Yeah, that's a Mandela effect. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I can see Yoda saying this, and
yeah, Yoda
like...
would definitely say this.
Yeah.
Now, also to be fair to Kess and Vanessa's like kind of attitude toward Ellie's fandom, I mean, I also kind of get that too, because like there are really weird hardcore otaku like anime fans out there that kind of ruin it for the rest of us. So like I do kind of get that, like if she's like that kind of person like that, or like, and we kind of know Ellie from like previous stories, like how weird and awkward she is as well. So like I can kind of get that she's one of the more toxic fans or like the more obsessive otaku fans or anime fans. So but at the same time, again, like y'all are a bunch of nerds. Don't berate her for being a nerd.
Well, they're nerds, just different nerds.
Yeah.
So
and they're also teenagers. Like teenagers are going to do this, unfortunately. Like this kind of like kind of judging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the next thing here, this is like just after like Ellie was like, or not Ellie, Kess was speculating about Ellie like being this weird shape-shifting thing and stuff like that. And then we get this description as Vanessa and Ellie, or Vanessa and Kess go out back where the kids are setting up this like play kind of thing. Watching a bunch of goths pay homage to the golden age of B-rated horror movies. Hey. John Carpenter's The Thing is not a B-rated horror movie, motherfuckers.
oh, they triggered you.
yeah, my nerd. Yeah, that's my nerddom. Accompanied with a heavy dose of hardcore techno and fake gore, seemed preferable to waiting around to be eaten by some shape-shifting monster. It turned out the show was taking place in Vanessa's backyard, and it was a reinterpretation of John Carpenter's The Thing. Oh, the irony. like she's dealing with, like, she's like speculating about like Ellie being this like shape-shifting monster thing, and then it just turns out like Vanessa's friends are like setting up a makeshift play of John Carpenter's The Thing, a movie about shape-shifting monsters. It's a nice touch for like the allegory of what's going on in the situation. Especially by the end, like the story, like by the end of the story, like the creature, the short hogger or whatever it was that was hunting down Kess, and like she gunned it down. It was shape shifting and constantly changing, kind of like a thing monster. So, the next thing here, her mind was teeming with images from hours earlier. The corrugated iron and scrap wood the corrugated iron and scrap wood arrangement that was supposed to resemble an Antarctic research station. The werewolves dyed to resemble sled dogs, the imps and spriggans animating the mechanical monster parts, the actors rushing about heroically in corpse paint and cold weather gear. The whole set going up in flames that would have met with John Carpenter's approval. Ah, there it is in full blast. Magical realism or fantastically mundane kind of vibes. Werewolves and imps and other magical beings performing a play based off of a 80s horror, an 80s/70s horror movie series. I love it. Like, I was here for this. Like, we are just completely going as like, yeah, they've got werewolves, so they're going to be the sled dogs that turn into the thing. The imps and spriggans are using their magic to like animate like various things and stuff like that. It's just like, and they're just all a bunch of kids basically like redoing or like retelling the story of John Carpenter's The Thing. It's just like, it's just so whimsical to me. This idea of like these magical creature youngsters like playing around with mortal pop culture. I just love that kind of aesthetic. But yeah, I'll move on to the next thing here. Her new roommates paused in their noisy rustling to listen and offer up the occasional chirp and squeak. I think I might have even seen a ghost, she went on. And you know what? I've even seen that face before. The countless small beasts ceased their comments as they all waited patiently for what she had to say. This is suddenly this part suddenly became like a Disney princess scene where like all the little critters being attentive to Kess and like seemingly to be intelligent enough to like understand her, and like, again, they don't talk English, but they seem to be reacting to her and responding to her in an intelligent way.
Yeah, I think this is the point, or close to the point, where she falls asleep.
Yeah,
Because there's no mention of her actually falling asleep, just that she wakes up later.
Yeah, she's slowly dozing off as she's like reminiscing and telling the story of her background, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, we get the story of the thing,
yeah,
reenactment, and then once the animals start sort of joining in, that's when it's like, okay, she's falling asleep.
yeah. That the way that it's either again, it wouldn't put me I wouldn't put it past the story, like the setting though, if they were actually like semi-intelligent creatures that were like paying attention to their new owner. Because that's the kind of thing that happens in fantasy sometimes, is like they're like, your animals are usually pretty intelligent and responsive.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the next thing I have here is, again, just sort of a description of like, again, something I really enjoyed about the story, and also kind of gives us a little bit more idea about where Kess is from and like where we are and like in regards to like the fantasy world, and then and then its relation to Midgard, which I guess is the term for the mortal world of Curtisville. Which makes sense because Midgard, mythologically, is the Norse name for Earth, like where humans live and dwell and stuff like that in Norse mythology. Like that's Midgard. And then there's like other realities and other places where other magical creatures or other beings exist in the all within like Yggdrasil, the world tree kind of stuff. So we're getting more of a taste of like the cosmology through this series, or we're kind of getting more of a taste of like the cosmology of the worlds of that the Curtisville stories seem to be taking place in. We're getting a little more of that in this. But I'll go with the quote here I have. 18 months later, I had nearly forgotten the supermarket incident. I had a new job waiting tables at this tea and coffee tavern. The landlord finally got around to repairing the apartment house and evicting the animal freeloaders. A few of my roomies even started up a backyard community garden. It was starting to be a pretty good place to live, although I still didn't like Des Moines New. Then autumn rolled around, and with its lengthening, chilly nights and thick fog, along with the weird wildlife you tend to expect with the closing season, spectral hounds, blue and green goblin cats, multi-tailed foxes, pipe-smoking draugr, ghost pirates and sailors on shore leave, people with detachable heads, various boogeymen coming over and borrowing the lawn furniture and party lanterns. This is giving me like, so first off, this is very D&D vibes, but also this is like when I started reading this part, I was like, this is really like, this is some serious Miyazaki, specifically Spirited Away like vibes. Like just like again, like this kind of slice of life fantasy world. Like, and I love the use of like a tea and coffee tavern. Like it's not an ale house. It's not like an ale house tavern. It's like basically it's a coffee shop in a fantasy world. And I again like the use of like there's a supermarket in this fantasy world as well. And then like apparently like as like the season closes, we get like they start seeing more and more of these like more like kind of like Halloween-esque inhabitants showing up, like with spectral hounds and pipe smoking draugr and boogeymen showing up to like borrow the lawn furniture and some party lanterns. Like I love the fantasy vibes mixed in with like kind of mundane society and like everyday walk of life kind of stuff. It just really fills me up, and it was sort of priming me for the next thing I had here in this story with this quote. Poor Joanne, she was always boasting constantly about her great magical abilities. She claimed to have even vanquished a nest of shadow demons that normally would never have been defeated by just one person. She actually thought she was on par with the greatest human spellcasters in history, instead of just being a trust fund hippie Wiccan wannabe. So when everyone was out at a movie on Halloween night, she called that something something that she thought was a lost child. Mikey, do you when you were reading the story, did you also get like feel like you wanted to like play or run a more slice of life urban fantasy game of D&D after this? Or is that just me?
That's just you.
Damn it. I want to run a slice of life like D&D game now, like this kind of thing. Like maybe set it in like One Less Dies Dat World setting, and have like D&D fantasy shenanigans with modern amenities like supermarkets and movie theaters and stuff like that, and like coffee taverns. Sort of like that TV adaptation of Terry Pratchett's The Watch, where like it's the Discworld, like Ankh Morpork fantasy like world of Discworld, but they've added like some of the buildings, and even like some of the technology is kind of like is very reminiscent of like modern day society. Though it still has like a bit of a fantasy flair because like the instead of electricity, it's like they have like it's like the clacks, so it's like telegraph systems, and like the CTR system that they have is actually just like imps inside of camera boxes painting frames every like second. Like again, magical realism, basically, or like that kind of fantastical whimsy, mundanity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to run it. I don't want to run it like super high stakes epic fantasy. I just want to run like a street level urban fantasy with some occult horror. That's what I want to. That's what I want to run. Like this was giving me those kind of vibes, like so hardcore, and I was like here for it. So the next thing I have here, as we're getting closer to the end of the story, so we're done like the her telling and her dozing off, and then she's waking up to the thing outside. So we got this. Her spine tingled as her hair rose on end. Instinctively, she took several steps back, and as she did, she heard a voice call out from the other side of the door. "It's me, Vanessa. Let me in. It's cold." Vanessa? Despite the cold, Kes started walking toward the door. "What are you doing? It's late." And I was just like, as soon as I heard that, like, got to this part in the scene and so, I was like, wow. To quote the internet, "This is an obvious Fae trap." I've seen enough Appalachian Trail or Appalachian like folklore videos to know that this is a clear, like, do not go near the door, do not go near the windows. That's how they get you. when you start hearing your friend's voice outside, and you know and it's like really late, and you know that your friend probably isn't out there, that's not your friend out there. That's something trying to get you. And then also, I do want to bring this up. So, like, I don't have a quote for it, but I just realized it. Yeah. So when she gets to the door, she finds that like a bunch of the blades are like digging into the doorway and stuff. And she goes to the back door, and it's been like suddenly there's like some ropes and like ship rope paraphernalia that's been like lashed against the door. And it wasn't until like the back door scene that I got that I didn't there because when I first saw the blades like stuck in the door, I thought it was like, oh shit, she's like something bad has happened to her, like something is. I didn't realize it was a good thing. Like I didn't realize it was like beneficial to her. I thought it was like something bad for her. But suddenly these blades were animated in the house. And it wasn't until it was brought up a little bit later that like, oh, it's like some kind of arcane lock. I was like, oh, so it was actually trying like that. It was like some spell put on her cottage to keep her safe from things outside. But it took a while for me to realize that. So, because the way I think it was described, it felt more like it was like something bad or like something unexpected. For even from her, and then like later she realizes in the story, clarifying to us that it was actually like a safety mechanism or some kind of security system for the cottage. But again, I'll move on to the next thing I have here, unless you had something about that, Mikey. Sorry.
No, it's basically to protect against pirate ghosts.
Yes, clearly, yeah. Pirate ghosts and sailors were on relief. On shore leave. Yeah. I mean, they're a rambunctious bunch, so I understand. But I'll move on to the next thing here. I'm gonna say sorry, Mikey, in advance for what my comments are gonna be for this one.
Okay.
It was a Safrasian-made rifle, a room temperature superconducting Langston with a telescopic scope and a carbon fiber barrel, to be exact. This weapon had been wrought centuries ago, not by the Yotar or the dwarves, or even the nearly extinct Ingwe, but by Kess's own people, the most diligent and talented of the mechanicians. The mechanicians.
Yeah, mechanicians, yeah.
Mechanicians. Against such powerful weapons, foes, both human and non-human, stood no chance. In an effort to secure universal peace, the Langston rifle, along with the other techno-enhanced weaponry, were banned from the mortal and free folk territories. This is truly moving into suddenly Shadowrun territory. Now you understand why I apologized in advance.
Yes.
Like banned advanced weaponry and supernatural beings of Fae living and walking among mortal folk and whatnot. Or like just like even if you take like there is a part of the Shadowrun universe where like you could go to like Tirnanog. Like there's like an alternative setting in the Shadowrun game, where you can go to like Tirnanog and actually deal with like fairy court like situation and bureaucracy and stuff like that in that meta plane. Because like that's the other thing, like the in Shadowrun they have like meta planes, which are basically the alternate realities of like all these fantastical places and such that you can like translate over to depending on like how you're getting there. And for the most part, you can't bring your own weapon. Your weapons translate to something more like similar to that location. But sometimes you can bring like advanced weapons into those regions, and they still like are your weapons from like the modern high tech era. But yeah, so this is definitely getting that kind of like vibe of like just like like high technology and fantasy and low fantasy. or like high technology with like fairy folk and supernatural aspects. Very Shadowrun to me. Also, fun fact: I love the use of of mortal and free folk territories, because free folk is another term for creatures and people of fairy. Like it's another term for the fairy folk or the fae and stuff like that. So. Yeah, I guess this also confirms exactly what Kess was, or like what her people were, to a degree. Because like that was something I've also been wondering since the beginning. Like she appears not to be human. She's Sarasian, but like or Sephrasian, but like I wasn't sure what that was. I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more of a description of what a Sephrasian looks like. To be a little bit more. That's the other thing. Like the story like goes in all this world building of like kind of like it's sort of natural world building, like through the context of like the story, but or like through the dialogue and through the some descriptions. But like unfortunately, because it's done that way, we don't get like full like kind of elaborations on what certain things are, because we don't have a layman in the story to like for people to have to explain something to. So we're just kind of like us as a reader are kind of left to wonder or like kind of speculate exactly what certain things are and what they are and what things are in. And it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but like it just, I feel like there could have been some more clarification through the story, for like what certain places and people were. But yeah, again, I love how she just like she was smuggling this like illegal high advanced weapon that can kill both humans and fae. It's just suddenly reminded of that scene from the Lost in Space movie. It's like where like the guy the one like security guy is just like reassembling his gun as like the monsters are coming through the door, and doing that badass turn with the gun and just starts like shooting through the door. It definitely kind of felt like suddenly it like shifted gears as like she was prepared because she smuggled this advanced weapon that could kill anything. Which I guess to a point does kind of take away from some of the dread at the end, because it suddenly becomes more of a thriller. As she is able to just like I have a surprise, a giant lethal gun, bang. Take that eldritch horror. But I'll move on to the last thing here, which is actually the destruction or the death of that creature. Coughing and sputtering, she quickly covered her nose she quickly covered her nose and pushed past the shattered door, and then fixed her eyes on what lay before her in the middle of the yard, tattered and torn, besmirched with gore and black slime. Slowly, it began transforming before her widening eyes. Clarissa Van Devoro, Clarissa Van Devoro, Ellie Lambert, the nameless frog-like girl, and then a twisted myriad of other forms, human and non-human. Some she hardly recognized. Then there was nothing left of it, but a sticky blackish patch on the dewy moonlit grass. Frowning, Kess went to repair the door. So I found this very interesting when we finally get the reveal of the seemingly slain creature, or this thing. So she was so it makes sense. Suddenly, this part of the story kind of makes sense because so she was being hunted or stalked by this thing the whole time. Like when she went to or to West Des Moines New, seemed to have tagged her and started like basically following her, and so she emigrated to Swan Wick, which seemed to be far away from those places. Thinking she might be safe, and then it showed up anyway. And she was finally able to deal with it and put it down. I feel like this story on its own works, like though a little bit more clarification on like the setting might help for me. It is stated right off the hop in an author's note on the wiki that this is an early standalone version of a story that was later developed as part of a series of stories known as The Last Day of Summer. And while it does also have connections to previous Kurzweil stories, like Ellie Lambert, for example, here, who died, I think in like the mayor's, like near the mayor's house in the wraparound plot of Summer Break 2017. And yeah, in 2017, Ellie dies in her bed when she was doing some kind of dark magics by like projecting her consciousness forth and transforming it into a phantasmal monster that gets shot and that kills her remotely in the process. And that happened again, like I said, that happened near, or like at least near, the mayor's estate in Swanwick with Vanessa present. So now I'm wondering, and I'm probably guessing at this point, that Kess was our narrator in the Summer Break 2017 wraparound plot. She's the one I think like maybe this was supposed to be that phantasm that that Ellie was projecting, but then like it's sort of odd because like so Ellie has known about this all along, like, or Ellie was basically hunting her down like from back in from earlier, like when she was dealing with the horrible with the when she was like dealing with the stuff in because this is all taking place in the fantasy world, right? Like in this Merlia United Kingdom, and like was this Short Hoggers creature, was that Ellie Lambert's like mind projecting into that reality? Like there's a bunch of questions we get if you go down that train of thought of like if you're connecting this to another story, and maybe you're not supposed to, but I just feel like maybe the story was maybe some of that will get developed more in the newer version of the story, which is the Last Day of October series, which we are going to be covering next week and onward, until the last day of October. But yeah, as in terms of a standalone story, I do think it works on its own because we kind of get like a beginning, middle, and end. Like we get the introduction to the characters, we get a middle part that gives us like kind of the background of what's been going on and like what the situation is, and then we have a conclusion here where Kess is able to put down what was stalking her and hunting her down from her background. But again, because I know ahead of time that this is like there's going to be another version of the story that is part of another series of stories, and it's tied to the Kurzweil stories that we've been reading. I'm left kind of wondering like what all I have so many questions about like what's going on exactly, and like I'm trying to add like connect dots. And I'm not sure if that's like a good thing to do at the moment. Because the story that we're reading today is a standalone versus what's going to come next. But I think it does do well as a standalone. I think is what I'm trying to get at here. Is the in terms of being a standalone story, it works well. Though it could use some more clarification on certain things if it's going to be a standalone, like so that you don't have to like worry about reading other stories if that was the original intent. And hopefully the version we end up reading as part of the Last Days of October series maybe like fill in some of those gaps, or at least like helps tie it together once we've read the other stories that came before it in the series. But we'll have to see, I guess. So that is finally my actual thoughts. The end of my actual thoughts. So, Mikey, these stands for evil. I'm sorry I took so long. You may
That's
go.
fine.
What do you have left?
Well, the first thing is in regards to the title.
Yeah.
So it's called Ellie Lambert.
Mhm.
Yet she's barely in the story at all.
I mean, you're right, but also she is kind of a key figure in that, like, the Ellie Lambert that was at the party at the beginning of the story was the monster.
Yeah. Yeah, we get that, but it takes so long to get to that.
It does take a little while. But it is an interesting reveal at the end. It's like, oh, like, yeah, this creature that she blasted like starts shifting through different like faces, including Ellie Lambert's. But it could have also been like Clarissa Van Devero. Or like yeah, what do you have any title suggestions for this one?
Well,
Kess's welcoming party.
yeah.
Actually,
Like,
that actually sounds like that would be a good one. Yeah.
like, because it's all about Kess and her going to a new town and having a welcome party.
Yeah.
So,
Hell, even just
yeah.
welcoming party would be a good one.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, welcoming party. Yeah, Kess's welcoming party. Do you have any other suggestions?
No,
Okay,
that's good enough.
fair.
All right. And then my next issue, which is apparently a running issue with MM Pratt stories, is stories within stories.
Yes, but I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's not a running issue.
Yeah,
It's just
it's not that bad. It's just I feel like it's getting a bit tired for me anyway, having read so many of these stories.
you know.
Um,
Oh yeah, this seems to be like this. This is maybe a part of MM Pratt's writing style.
yeah. And then my other issue is the transitions.
Yeah,
As I always seem to have issues with transitions, or their lack thereof. Like there's no um sleep transition, which I mean that is sort of okay, but like she stays in bed for such a long time that you wonder how much of this is just her mind going off and on tangents
yeah.
because she's trying to sleep.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the point of that part of it is it's slowly kind of transitioning from like her telling the story or recalling these stories, and it's slowly slipping into dream, and then like getting a little bit more of like the memory skewed and such.
Yeah. So when we get to the section with the goblins or whatever, like that's very much a dream-like sequence.
Yeah, but it's also a memory. This is the kind of thing that would happen in a movie or a TV show. It's kind of written like a TV show scene where like a character like after like a situation that's happened in a movie in the present day, they go off to sleep, and they like we get them like slipping away into sleep, and then it cuts to a flashback. Like that's kind of how I saw it. Was it was sort of like as they're falling asleep, we cut away to a flashback of their past, where we get more context to their previous situations. Like we see that in TV shows all the time and in movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the way it was written, like it maybe could have like been a little bit more clarified on that in terms of like a transitionary thing, I did actually think that the transition from like the shenanigans with the thing play and her suddenly being back at her cottage, I actually thought that was a pretty safe transition. Like that was a pretty good transition. Like at first I was like wondering if it needed a horizontal line, but then as I read it over a couple times, I was like, oh no, this actually is pretty good. Like this is like, it states that like sometime later that night, like she's back at her cottage, and she's going over all her gifts and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I guess the dream sequence could feel like it's sort of becoming more of a dream and less memories, but I think I think the purpose of it was just really to have like a flashback to Kess's past.
Yeah.
To kind of catch us, the reader, up on what has been going on in her life.
Mm-hmm. It just, I just said I don't like the transitions.
All right, fair. That's fair.
Anyway, moving on.
Yes.
So now for some connective tissues time, because I gotta do that, you know.
Yeah, of course.
Kes thoughtfully sipped her glass of lemonade as she discreetly studied the strange guest in the clamorous town hall. While I was reading the story, I was sipping lemonade.
Wow, nice. well, visiting a guest in your house. Across the room. It's like... Turns out your brother or somebody was just like had some friends over, or had a friend over. Is like, I don't trust this person.
Well, there's multiple times where she sips lemonade, and I was like, "Oh, it's a good time to sip lemonade."
Oh, so it was actually that, like, it was more of a suggestion, like kind of like a was a form of suggestion. It's like you're like the story's talking. It's like the character was getting hungry. It's like, I could really go for a bite right now, actually, as you're reading it.
Yep. And I already had lemonade within arm's reach, so I was like, okay.
Yeah, or it's like when somebody, or like, yeah, like sipping lemonade, sipping coffee, and then you start taking a sip of your own coffee as you're reading the story. It's like the power of suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't we just like have a conversation about that in one of our other episodes with I think it was the 8th Orphan, where that story was talking about the power of suggestion.
Yeah,
and how like
the itching,
yeah, the itching, yeah. So it seems like you aren't immune to the power of suggestion there, Mikey.
Yes. So that's the end of my actual thoughts.
Oh, geez.
And although there's one more thing.
Yeah. One more.
I think about it. One more thing. The art.
Oh yeah, you're right. There is a piece of art in the story.
Yeah. And the issue I have.
You have an issue with it? Okay.
Is that it describes her as having ridiculously short page boy style hair.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah.
Yet the picture does not have short hair.
Yeah, and this doesn't really look like the description of her transformation, right? Like, or no, it kind of does it fit her transformation, like when she when Kess sees her in the moonlight?
Well, there is no description in the moonlight. Is there?
I thought there was. Hang on, let me double check that.
It just says it transforms and changes shape between multiple forms.
No, that's at the end though, right?
Yeah.
No, but like there's a part. I thought that. Yeah, hang on. Yeah, there's a yeah. So her. Hang on, where we go here? For a moment, just as the girl stepped into one of the moon. Oh yeah, so for a moment, just as the girl stepped into one of the moonlit patches, the whole shape of her face seemed to have changed. Her tight Buster Brown curls grew loose and dark, while her cherub features grew pimply cheeked and dough faced. This is like, it's become that the bulging frog face girl is what it's becoming into.
Yeah.
I wonder, was this is this supposed to be a picture of Ellie, or is this supposed to be a picture maybe of not Vanessa, but or Kess? Maybe it's a picture of Kess, or it could be a picture of that Clarissa individual.
It's hard to say, but
Yeah,
at the beginning it's describing Ellie Lambert, and then you have this picture, and you go,
yeah.
that doesn't work.
No, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, like it does. Like she does have large pale blue eyes.
Yeah,
Rather we don't see her oversized ears. Her nose isn't really pink button nose. She doesn't have short. She absolutely does not have short page boy style hair in the story. It is sun bleached straw, kind of. Or I guess it's a kind of blonde.
yeah,
And she always wore pretty yet impractical looking dresses. So, and she kind of looks like she's wearing a pretty dress or something like that.
yeah,
Though we just get the collar bit of it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. Like, I wonder if like maybe that should be altered to more fit the description of the illustration, because I mean this illustration is by Pratt.
Yeah.
So maybe this was like an earlier version or like a later version of the image, or before like the description in the story. I don't know. Like that is what is a page boy style haircut? I need to get a visual of that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. It's so actually it's not too far off actually. Her ridiculously short. I mean, it like if it's ridiculously short, it is more of like kind of like a not a pixie cut, but it's like
a
sort
bob
of cut. Yeah, it's almost like a bob cut. Like it's almost like it's almost like a short bob cut or a bowl cut, or like a longer bowl cut.
Which doesn't match the style in the picture either.
No, I mean I'm seeing some of them that are long, like the longer ones look more like the one in the image, but like it specifically says shortened page boy style cut. So yeah, it's not exactly translating well. It's a cool image, like art wise, like visually it's a really good picture, but it doesn't fit the description of the character it's described in the story. At least not to a T.
Yeah.
This is definitely a case of like there was some like the story came like either the story or the image came out first, and then the other thing came out after, and like there was some creative liberties done. some alterations that weren't corrected. But yeah.
All right. So now I'm done with patch thoughts.
Okay. Well, on to final thoughts then. I'm still going to recommend it. I do really enjoy. I did really enjoy the story, and I was able to follow through with the story for the most part. I really love all the fantasy elements of it, and like the later horror aspects with the spectral monster, this thing like trying to get into her cottage, and the even in her backstory, like the strange thing that was trailing her, it seemed. I've been using the term magical realism a lot throughout these these Pratt stories, but also the term whimsical horror kind of comes to mind as well. Like sort of like it is horror aesthetic, with like werewolves and vampires and spriggans and and imps, but like they're all living together in like a town. So it's sort of like you remember that like that Family Channel, Disney Channel, like miniseries or movies, Halloween Town, where like
No.
it's a town in another reality, in like a slightly like just like an offshoot of our reality, where all the Halloween monsters go when Halloween is done. Like they only show up in the mundane, in the mortal world when it's Halloween, but when Halloween is over, they all go to this town and live there for the rest of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it starts with like basically a family, like these three siblings find out that they're actually descended from witches, and the oldest one like needs to go to Halloween Town and start her witch training, otherwise she'll lose her magic forever. But her mother didn't who left Halloween Town for the mortal world, like doesn't want her kids learning about Halloween Town or being a witch, and like kind of has a fight with the grandmother about the whole situation, because the grandmother wants to bring the grandkids into Halloween Town and such. But it's like it's how like it's all these like spooky monsters and like cyclopses and werewolves and vampires and skeletons and stuff like that. But they're all nice, like they're all like just jovial and like everyday like people. It kind of gave me like that kind of like it kind of brought me back to that kind of aspect of like a whimsical horror where like there's horror themings and there's horror like aesthetic, but it's whimsical in its way as well, with the mundane slice of life kind of aspects to it. I do feel like I get lost, like I've said earlier, I do feel like I got lost in the weeds in spots with the story because I was trying to figure out what the setting was, because like, and part of that might be on me because I was immediately thinking that this was like the UK and like the in the real world, not the UK in some fantasy adjacent world, but also because we have Ellie Lambert, who we know, and it seems to be, well, at first it seems to be the same Ellie Lambert from Curtisville, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's like maybe it's like Ellie Lambert's dead and this thing took her face, or like maybe this wasn't Ellie Lambert. I don't like. Again, I'm getting caught in the weeds, I think, because of the other stories that we've read in this by this author. She's
or maybe it is Ellie Lambert, but it's her consciousness controlling the monster, and then the monster gets killed.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm thinking that's. Oh, so you're saying like it's not like that? Like this isn't her monster mind projected. This is her. This monster was like possessed by Ellie Lambert's possession or projection. So yeah, like because that's the thing. Like I'm trying. Like it felt like this was sort of like what happened right before the wraparound plot of Summer Break 2017. Like in my head, and that's because I've read Summer Break 2017, and we were going into these stories expecting there to find some connections between them, because some of them were prologues, some of them were side stories or spin-offs that had a couple of characters from previous stories and such like that. Like we kind of went into these stories with that mentality. So I'm not sure if I'm stuck in the weeds because of the setting, because of my own personal like biases from like previous stories that we've been covering, and like my own like kind of predilections of going into the story. I do think this story as it is, as a standalone, works for the most part. It just needs some clarification, maybe some clarification on the world. I do like that the info, because like even though we need some clarification, at least I need some clarification on certain things in the story to make it a little bit better. I do like the way information is given to us in the world setting, because it's all done through character point of view, and we don't necessarily have a layman to like have to be explained things. But that's not a bad thing. Like it's just sort of sometimes makes things a little bit harder for a reader to get the full grasp of where they are in the story or in the setting. But for the most part, I think the story is pretty good at building up this world that we were seeing, this like this whimsical fantasy world that has like modern amenities like supermarkets and movie theaters and John Carpenter's The Thing and Motley Crue, and but there's apparently more than one moon in the sky, and like they know of the mortal world as Midgard, like that's where humans come from, and like this is some kind of like diverging, or either some kind of threshold world, or that's like on the like just neighboring our own reality that they can occasionally like slip into and stuff like that. And I mean, again, like they know about America, like because Ellie Lambert's seems to be a human from California. They know what California is, so like it's very interesting. It's like, yeah, like they're aware of the mortal world, but this is not the mortal. It doesn't seem to be the mortal world. So like, Pratt, if you're listening to this at this point, if you've made it this far, sorry and thank you. I wouldn't mind maybe some clarification or even some recommendations from some of your other stories that do clarify exactly this sort of setting, about the sort of cosmology you've created, because I am genuinely fascinated with that. Also, do you have a name? Something that we brought up off recording, me and Gamer. do you have like a name for this series? We've been calling them the Curtisville stories, or the M. Pratt stories. But like, is there like a name that you've come up with for like kind of like an umbrella name for these all these stories that are in the seemingly the same setting that you've made? Inquiring minds want to know, i.e., mine. So, yeah. Back to my final thoughts. I swear I'll get to the end of this. I do think that there is some room for improvement, for giving the reader some more context to certain things. But as it is, I'm still willing to give it a recommendation because it is a complete story that you can follow through. You can follow through and finish and not be like totally left in the dark. Like you get the premise of the story, you get the plot line, the plot beats, and all that stuff. You get to learn about these characters and these strange, fantastical places. Maybe Short Hoggers, the later version that was like redone for the that series of stories, will address some of the issues I have. Maybe it'll give me more questions, but for now, I think this one's still pretty good, and it's still there's some room for improvement, but it's still good. What's that line from Stitch? It's like, it's still good, but still good. So yeah, bottom line, I'm still going to recommend it. Mikey, D stands for evil.
Okay, so I guess the number one issue I have with this is that the majority of the story happens while the character is lying in bed.
You really do not like the anything
The
that has to
stories
do with
within
like dreams.
stories.
Yeah, you don't like the stories within stories, dream stories. Everything can be false memoried.
Yeah. Like, is she actually awake at the end? We don't know.
Yeah, it is. I will say that, to be fair, that does like that ending does feel very much like a dream thing. It's like where the nightmare suddenly becomes a dream again as the dreamer gains control of the dream. It's like, well, I just happen to have this cool kill everything gun that I smuggled into.
Yep. So now, that being said, I know that there are some uh, interesting things like the whole shape-shifting plot, but the problem is it just takes so long for it to actually come to fruition. Like, oh, you see them and they sort of change in the moonlight, and then we don't hear anything else about the shapeshifter until, well, talk about the thing.
Yeah, we get like
And
some allegories for shapeshifting and stuff.
yeah, but then it's not until the very end. It's like, oh yeah, it was a shapeshifter all along. Haha. Like,
I mean, to be fair, like I think, I mean, it is sort of like it's a slow burn because
yeah,
on top of like the overarching threat, like we do get an overarching threat that is introduced at the beginning and then is speculated on here and there and through the bulk of the story, and then is revealed at the end to be the threat. But the rest of the story is it is world building, and it is like kind of like it's taking its time to show us like the slice of life and like the situation of what's going on, and then like linking the threat and the plot with this sort of like background information and this sort of world building stuff that we're getting. So
yeah,
it just takes its time. It meanders.
yeah, yeah. So I am actually going to bump up my recommendation a little bit.
I'm sorry. Gamer's like, you can't do this. Gamer's not here. He won't believe me. It's definitely not like we have this on recording. I'm sorry.
So I'm going to give it a low end partial recommendation,
Wow.
because there is some things that I thinking about it did enjoy of the story, but the
Fair.
rest of it is just my own annoyance with stories and stories.
Yeah. Your own preference is kind of butting against the story's style.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's actually understandable. Like not every story is going to appease to everybody's like personal tastes and opinions. So,
Mhm.
okay. So that was it, right?
Yep.
So that will do. So a recommendation and a low partial recommendation that was changed from a non-recommendation. Wow. Again, gamers never going to believe this. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's episode. So if you like what you heard, or if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below where this gets posted. We're all on Twitter for the most part. Mikey's at the Stands for Evil, and I'm at Review Cultist. I'm also on Blue Sky as Review Cultist, so you can send me messages there. You can also send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's ALDENTERIGAMORTIS@gmail.com, where you can also leave us suggestions for other creepypastas, SCPs, spooky things. You creep it, we'll peep it. Yeah! Mikey, I don't suppose you want to do the yeah too, or...
No.
And if you'd like to help support our show financially, you can go to Patreon. Select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have $2 and $5 tiers with special episodes, early access, and extra content. To our patrons that are helping support the show, thank you guys immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay. As always, we very much appreciate that. And to our listeners and the authors of these stories, thank you immensely, because without your listenership, it'd be like screaming into the void. And without your authorship, without these stories that you post online for people to enjoy and read and sometimes get creeped out by, we really wouldn't have much of a show because we'd have nothing to talk about. So thank you. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
And I'm Mikey. The E stands for evil.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.